Hey everyone, it's Anna. Welcome back to my channel and thank you for spending some time with me. I wanted to come on and share how I've been making these wishy-washy watercolory backgrounds using my background stamps. And it's quite different from what you get when you just stamp the image with regular ink. So I thought I would show you how I do this and how I actually created this type of a background on my card. So there's the snow couple that was released for SweetMissDaisy Designs in January. Here's another one. So you can see the background there uses one of my background stamps. And then here it is in pink with the little stinker stamp set, which is currently out of stock, but it'll be back end of next week. And so I think this technique is super fun. It's probably my favorite way to use background stamps. And I used it, I think last month as well. Or maybe even the month before with some of the new background stamps that released. But I thought I would come on and show you how I actually do it. So you get kind of a variety of impressions depending on how much ink is on the stamp and how much water you use. So, but let's go ahead and take a look. So the stamp I'm going to be using is this one, and it is called Linked. And this is from the SweetMissDaisy January release. When you get the background stamps, they have a carrier sheet and a backing sheet. The carrier sheet is the heavier one on the front that has the image of the stamp on it. And then it has a thinner backing piece of acetate on it. So you want to pull that back piece off and leave the stamp on the carrier sheet. I find this is the easiest way to use them. Of course, if you want to, you could remove the stamp from this sheet as well and put it into a stamping platform or put it on a great big clear block if you have one. But I just find it easy to leave it on the carrier sheet. It's a nice heavy acetate and it does a nice job of keeping the stamp nice and flat. I also have some watercolor paper here that's been cut down a little bit. So I'm going to use that. I like using watercolor paper when I do this technique so that it can handle the water that I'm going to be adding to the stamp. And then I'm also going to be using a water-based ink. So for this technique, I like using the Stampin' Up! Ones. You could also use a distress ink. Those are water reactive. But you don't want to use a hybrid ink. Like, for example, the Impression Obsession inks were hybrid ink, so they're not water-based. They're a hybrid between ink and pigment, so they don't react the same. So you'll want to use a water-based dye ink, and that's what these Stampin' Up! Ones are. And they work really well for this technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this, let's see, Misty Moonlight, so you can see it nice. And I'm going to go ahead and just ink up my stamp just like I would if I was going to stamp it normal. And since my pieces of watercolor paper here are kind of small, I don't have to go crazy all the way to the edges, but you'll want to make sure that you ink your stamp as large as you want, you know, to be covered by your paper. So once I have the ink down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some regular water. This is just water from the bathroom sink. And I have it in a spray bottle. And I'm just going to give it a couple light mists. You don't want it to be completely saturated, but you do want to have a little bit of water that can gather in the stamp design. And then you just take one of your pieces of watercolor paper, and I like to make sure that I'm using the front side or the textured side of the watercolor paper. Some of the cellulose papers, you can really tell, have a smoother surface on the back and a slightly more textured surface. I like to make sure I'm using the front. And then just place it down, and using your fingers, you can just press that paper down into the stamp. And if you want to, you can put another piece of paper over the top if you don't want to get your fingers inky at all. And then I find it easiest to pick up the paper from the stamp using a set of tweezers. and you want to just pick it straight up. And you can see that gave sort of an okay impression from the stamp, but you can see how this area up here had a little bit more water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp, or I'm going to mist the stamp again. Oop, I got a big drip right here. My bottle must be leaking. So I've added just a little bit more water. I have not added any more ink. And I'm going to take another piece of watercolor paper, and I'm going to try and set it down in the same spot, but if I don't, it's okay. It's just where I didn't set it down previously will have more ink on it. So you might get, if you don't set it down in the exact same spot, you might get a heavier line. And then just pick up your paper. And so see, now we're getting a more wishy-washy look. There's the difference in those two. And you just got to set them aside to let them dry. And it doesn't take very long. Now I'm not going to add more ink, but I am going to add more water. So I'm just going to give this a couple more spritzes of water. And I have another piece of watercolor paper that's been cut down to the same size. And I'm just going to lay it on the stamp and do the exact same thing. And you want to give the paper a little bit of time to soak up color. That's why I like rubbing my hands with it. And so there we've got an even more wishy-washy. So here's the one we just previously did. And then compared that to the first impression that we did. As you can see, it's getting more and more interesting. And I generally can get 4 prints using the Stampin' Up! Ink. Of course, the very last one is going to be the lightest, but go ahead and give it another spritz of water. And again, I have not added any more ink, just water. And I've got another piece of watercolor paper. I'm going to set that down. And then use my tweezers to pull the print. And look at that one's even fun too. And I could continue going as long as I'm still getting color and I'm happy with the results that are pulling. You can continue to get ink off of the stamp. We'll do one more since I have paper cut. So I'm not going to add more ink, but I am going to add more water. So I've got a plain piece of watercolor paper, and I'm just going to lay it down again. And if you only wanted this to be over a small area of your background, you could just press a portion of the cardstock onto the stamp, and then that would give you just an isolated area instead of covering the whole background. And I'm going to use my tweezers and pick up the print. See, I can get even more. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, I love this. Okay, I have one more piece of paper here. And then we will have reached the end of my paper stash right here. I'd have to go cut more, but I'm not gonna add any more ink, but I'm gonna add more water. See, isn't it amazing how many pulls you can get with the Stampin' Up! Ink pads? And then this is just plain watercolor paper. See, and I don't mind if I get a little bit of watercolor pull for my fingers onto the back side. That's just fine. Nobody will know it's there. And there's that one. Oh, see, I could continue going and going because I'm getting these really fun watercolory looks. I love it. So I'm going to set this one aside to dry too. And what's really fun is it's actually pulling in some of the previous colors that I stamped. I stamped a red or a pink color, and you can see it pulling the ink up from the areas that are kind of recessed when I didn't get the stamp perfectly clean from my previous use. So those are pulling in as well, but I think these are so beautiful. And I'm just going to get this stamp kind of dried off here. And then we can take a look at all of them next to each other. And this technique works with any of your background stamps. So give them a try. You might find one that really surprises you and you're like, oh my gosh, I just love this stamp using this technique. I tend to like the ones that have interlocking areas because they tend to catch the ink really nicely. So I'm just going to give this a quick dry off with my tea towel. All right. And now, once I have this clean, I can go ahead and, or as clean as I'm going to get it here, I can go ahead and put my carrier sheet right back on, the backing here, and then store my stamp away. And it makes it so nice and easy to use. And it's just, I think it's just a great way to use background stamps. So off it goes. So now let's take a look at all of the little things that I've just pulled. I also need to put my ink pad away so I don't drop it on the floor. Oh, if I can figure out how to close it. I think I need to add some Vaseline or something because some of my ink pads are super hard to open. Maybe I need to add a little something to lube up the edges there. All right, so let's take a look. Here is the first impression that we pulled. That's nice, dark, but nice. And then I did this one. And then this one. See, I think it gets more and more beautiful the more you pull. And then this one. This one has a lot of pink from my previous ink. So I love that one. And then this was the last one I did. Oh, there's two more here. I had it stacked. And then this is the last one. So there they all are. You can see the progression. And I think they are so fun. Oh, you can see all of them. So then what I would do is I would take this one, for example, and I can show you how I would. So I would take my stamp then, and I would stamp it, my skunk or my snowman or whatever image I'm using, and I would stamp it directly on to this print. Let me get a stamp and show you. Use the snow couple again, since they're handy here. I'm just going to take them off and set this little skunky aside. I'm going to grab out my mini Misty. This is my stamping platform that I love so much. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that stamped piece in my Misty, and I'm going to place my snow couple. Maybe I'll put them this way. I think I need to do it this way. Give them a little more room. My watercolor paper is not cut big enough really for this image, but we'll make it work. And then I'm going to pick up the image with my platform and ink it up. And I'm not so concerned about getting a perfectly stamped impression on the inside of the image, but I do want to make sure that I get the outside edges of the image nicely stamped and all the snowflakes around them nicely stamped. And see, it's not quite dark enough. My ink pad is probably a little dry. So stamp it again. I have a tendency to not close my ink pad and then walk away from my desk, and then my ink pad is open to the air for days. All right, so there's that. And I think I'll stamp it one more time, just for good measure. See how the Misty allows me to stamp the image in the exact same spot multiple times? I love that. Love it, love it. All right, so there is the third impression. So you can see that the background now is in my snowman bodies. And I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another piece of watercolor paper. Let's see. I don't have watercolor paper handy, so I'll take a piece of marker-friendly paper. And set it down. And I'm going to stamp my snow couple on this paper. Let's see. Now I need to change ink because I was using a permanent ink and I can't use a permanent ink with markers. So I need to use my Memento ink, which I can use when coloring with markers. So I'm going to stamp it again and get a really great impression. All right, now I'm going to color this image. And let's see, let's get you zoomed in just a smidge. All right, so I'm going to color the image just real quick. We've got a light blue to make the snowman look cold and frosty. And putting the blue where it would be in the shadows or around the edges, and leaving white highlights in the center there. That'll make their bodies look round. So there's some blue. Let's see, how about we give them just a bit of a pink cheek? Even though these snowmen already have ink on their cheeks, we can put the pink right over the top there. And how about we do a really dark purple hat? So it's not black, but gives the impression of being black. So there's that. And then let's see, what color should we do for her hat? How about pink again? Because why not have a pink hat on a snowman? And then she can have pink gloves and a pink scarf. I really just want to show you guys how to do this technique. Doesn't have to be a coloring tutorial, right? And then let's give the gent here a let's go for a turquoise green scarf. I guess this is more green than turquoise, but that's all right. And we could give him the same color hat band. And I always like doing the broom of my snowman kind of like a yellow ochre color. And I like doing the stripe on the broom red, because you know they used to use red thread to hold the broom bristles together. So I like doing that red. And then let's see, how about a brown for the broom handle? this one. And then, oh, we should have done the stars as well with the broom. And then I think lastly are his mittens. And I'll do a kind of like a blue-gray, a light blue-gray. Oh, maybe that'd blend in too much with his body. Maybe just a blue. He'll just have blue mittens. This is B93, so it is actually kind of like a blue-gray. All right. So there's our cute little image colored. So now what I want to do is I actually want to cut it out so that I can glue it right over the top of my previously stamped image here. So I'm just going to take my little scissors that I used for fussy cutting, and I'm just going to cut out the image. I don't have to be really, really careful about cutting around every little bits and bob that's sticking out from the snowman, because when I put this cutout image down on my previously stamped image, those little bits and bobs that stick out from the image are going to show because they're stamped on the background. So I'm just going to quickly fussy cut this. See, like those little things sticking out from the broom? I don't have to worry about cutting around those. I'm just going to cut them right off. And then I can cut around the broom. Let's get some of this extra off here. Makes it a little easier to fussy cut when you don't have to handle so much paper. So I'm going to cut down there. And I'm actually cutting off some of the black line, and that's perfectly okay, because you won't actually know it is missing. That's another one of the reasons I love this technique. You don't really want to leave any white showing. So if I was cutting around the hat here and I cut too far outside and left that piece of white like that, you would be able to see that when it's on the card. So I like to make sure I don't leave any white, and err on the side of taking off some black line instead of leaving white around the edge. So get in there. See those little lines around her glove? I just cut them right off. And cut off the snow. Right up to the broom handle and across. Okay, so I want to cut down between her mittens, or her mitten and her face, and get that piece out of there. And that's pretty cute. So now what I want to do, because you can kind of see the white edge of the paper, I want to color that black. So what I like to use is a water-based marker, but I don't have one handy right here. So I'm going to use an alcohol marker, but you just want to be super careful. If you use alcohol marker, just be really careful because it can bleed into your image really fast. And then you'll have feathering in your colored image. So if you're using an alcohol marker, just be really, really careful. So I'm just lightly hitting the edges of this paper here to kind of hide that white core. And I always do it from the back because I am less likely to draw a line over my image if I'm doing it from the back side rather than the front. So I have too many times been coloring the edge of the image like this, looking at the front side, only to slip and then I draw a crazy line across my image. So I have learned to do it on the back side. And really your goal is to get the edge of the paper, but because this is an alcohol marker, I'm being kind of generous with the color on the back, but my marker is catching the edge of the paper there, just ever so slightly. All right, so now I've gone all the way around and I want that to dry. All right, so there's my cute little couple there. And now I'm gonna take some adhesive and I'm gonna apply the adhesive with a generous margin. So the adhesive is pretty well inside my stamped image, because what happens with the liquid glue is when you put the two pieces of paper together, the adhesive has to go somewhere and it's going to move out towards the edge of your paper. So you don't have to put the adhesive right onto the edge like that. And then you just place the image right down on the previously stamped image and just line it up so it matches with your other stamped image. And just like that, all of those little bits and bobs that you cut off from the stamped image as you were fussy cutting are back. And you never even know that it's separate. So what I like to do then is I like to place an acrylic block over the top just to kind of get those two pieces to adhere together really nicely and flat. And then once it's dry, then you can continue assembling your card with your stamped image that has a beautiful, beautiful background. So I hope that was helpful. And I hope you love this technique as much as I do. It's one of my favorite ways to use background stamps. And I just think it's so fun. And of course you can use, you know, all different kinds of colors. I tend to like the blues because it makes it look like the sky, especially in the winter, if I can get something that looks like snow coming down, which I think this does. So, but really, really fun. So thanks for watching. Hope it's helpful. And I will talk to you again very soon. Bye.